The movie begins on Mars. That's right, the planet Mars. We see 4 astronauts collecting rock samples from the ground. Meanwhile, the other astronauts inside their vessel predict a storm headed their way and warn them about it because, judging by their readings, it's going to be worse than anything they've ever faced. They debate on whether or not they take the risk and stay so they can finish collecting samples, but the commander of the mission eventually decides that they'll leave. They all put on their spacesuits and get ready to take off, but some rocks thrown around by the storm hit their ship and damage it. The astronauts go out into the storm to fix the damage, but in the process, one of them, named Mark, gets knocked away by some of the debris. His suit gets damaged and the others are unable to communicate with him. The storm gets worse, and the astronauts inside confirm that the ship can't take any more hits. The commander sends the others inside and tries to find Mark, but she's unable to, and eventually gets back on the ship before it takes off. As they fly away, the crew mourns the loss of their colleague, who they believe is dead. The director of NASA holds a press conference and informs the public that their mission on Mars was successful and that the crew is heading back home, but also reveals that one of the astronauts died. Meanwhile, Mark, who's still alive, wakes up on the red planet. His suit warns that his oxygen level is low, and even worse, he's been impaled by some of the debris. Mark cuts off the excess metal and slowly walks back to the base, and when he enters inside, he takes off his suit before surgically removing the metal from his body and stapling it afterward. Later, Mark turns on a video log and records a message, explaining that the communication systems on his suit were damaged during the storm. He goes on and states that he doesn't hold anything against his crew for leaving him behind because they had no other choice and probably thought he was dead. He also accepts the fact that he would probably run out of food and die on Mars because he knows it would take at least 4 years before NASA sends another manned mission to Mars. After recording the message, Mark walks around the base and sees some of the things his colleagues left behind. He sorts out some of their stuff and puts them away. Later, he checks the stores in the base and predicts that the food he has left would only last him about a year. As a result of this discovery, Mark decides that he'll have to plant food that would last him at least 3 years. Thankfully, he's also a botanist, so that wouldn't be too hard. He takes some of the potatoes the crew brought with them to eat during Thanksgiving. He then dusts off the solar panels and uses the dirt to plant the potatoes. Mark also uses the crew's waste as fertilizer, but quickly realizes that he doesn't have enough water to grow the potatoes. Determined to find a solution, Mark sets up a machine that produces water through small chemical fires. A few days later, his experiment works, and water begins to appear on the walls inside his garden, which in turn helps the plants grow. Meanwhile, back on Earth, NASA holds a funeral for him. Afterward, the Mars missions director Vincent tells the director of NASA that he feels they should send a team back to Mars to retrieve the valuable equipment that the crew left behind. However, the director doesn't agree with him, claiming that he doesn't want the public to see Mark's dead body since everything they do would have to be televised. Vincent then explains that Mark's body would never decay on Mars, and suggests that they make the mission look like they're going to retrieve Mark's body for his family. Meanwhile, Mindy Park, NASA's satellite supervisor, notices the movement of the equipment in the base on Mars. She immediately contacts Vincent and informs him about it. After watching the satellite images, they conclude that Mark is still alive. Eventually, the news gets out that Mark is alive because they would have to release the footage in the next 24 hours. Afraid that NASA would receive backlash for leaving one of their astronauts behind, the director sets up a press conference to assure the public that they would do everything to bring Mark back home alive. Meanwhile, back on Mars, Mark does the calculations to find out where he has to be in the next 4 years when the next NASA crew arrives. Based on his calculations, the location is about 3,000 kilometers away, and considering the speed his rover travels at, it would take him 50 days to get there. This is because the rover only travels 35 kilometers before needing to be brought back to the base for a recharge. As a result, Mark decides to make some adjustments to the rover so it travels longer. He successfully doubles the time it lasts, but had to turn off the heating. Because of this, the rover becomes too cold for him, and he realizes that he won't survive that long inside the vehicle. He then embarks on a mission to locate the missing rover called the Pathfinder, which would allow him to travel longer distances efficiently. Meanwhile, on Earth, Vincent and Mindy find out Mark's objective to be at the location of the next mission in 4 years. They decide to hold another press conference to inform the public. They've also sped up their preparations so that they can save Mark as soon as possible, and predict that they'll be ready for the next mission in 9 months instead of 4 years. The director of NASA is pleased with the news, but tells Vincent and Mindy not to inform Mark's crew that he's still alive because he doesn't want them to get distracted while they're still in space and trying to return to Earth. However, the flight director, Mitch Henderson, strongly objects to this. On Mars, Mark successfully harvests 400 potatoes. He also locates a rover called the Pathfinder, which got lost on Mars years ago. He uses the Pathfinder to communicate with NASA, using the replica they have at their headquarters on Earth. At first, they are not able to communicate efficiently, but Mark finds a way to use complex mathematics to communicate with them using text. Vincent informs him that they plan to send another ship to rescue him, and Mark is glad to see this. However, when he finds out that NASA hasn't told his crew that he's alive, he gets furious, so Vincent realizes that they have to tell his crew. The director of NASA finally allows Henderson to inform Mark's crew that he's alive and that they plan to rescue him. Back on Mars, Mark records another video message, stating that he's grown enough food to sustain him till the next ship arrives to rescue him. Unfortunately, tragedy strikes, and one night, the entrance chamber blows out, which causes Mark to get injured and his helmet to crack. He quickly seals it with tape so he doesn't run out of oxygen. Afterward, he goes to his garden and is distraught when he finds out that the exposure to Mars's atmosphere destroyed all the plants, including the device he set up to produce water. He then informs NASA via text again, and the guys back on Earth fear that Mark could die of starvation if they don't speed up their preparations for the next mission even further. Later, Mark's crew is granted permission to contact him, and they all catch up. Meanwhile, NASA decides to bypass inspections on the ship they're sending to Mark to save time, but it explodes shortly after liftoff. China National Space Administration hears the news and offers to help the Americans on their mission to save Mark. A physicist named Rich Purnell comes up with a plan to use China's rocket ship to supply Mark's crew with enough food that they would use to get back to Mars. He suggests that after the resupply, they would use the Earth's gravity to slingshot the crew's ship back to Mars without using as much fuel. The major drawback of this plan is that the entire mission would take 500 days before Mark's crew can return home with him. NASA's director rejects the idea, claiming that he's not going to risk the lives of the entire crew to save Mark. Despite his refusal, Henderson secretly sends the plans and coordinates to Mark's crew. The crew takes a unanimous vote and ultimately decides that they'll go back to Mars to save Mark, even though it means they'd be away from their families for a much longer time. They all contact their families and explain why they have to stay back in space. When the director finds out that Mark's crew has gone off course, he furiously scolds Henderson for going against his instructions, but at that point, his yelling is futile. Soon, the Hermes ship, which Mark's crew is on, meets up with China's rocket ship at the rendezvous point to receive the new supplies. Just as Rich predicted, Earth's gravity pushes the ship back into space and into the direction of Mars. Back on Mars, Mark begins packing up all of the equipment the crew left behind and places them on the wagon he attached to the rover. 7 months later, he waits at the rendezvous point to meet with his crew. There, he's expected to set up his ship and get ready to blast into space to meet up with the Hermes ship. Mark gets on his ship and finally gets ready to leave Mars. He gets in position and launches the ship when he's given the signal. On launch, the tarp immediately gets blown away and Mark passes out. When he wakes up, his crew informs him that the Hermes is moving too fast and that his ship can't catch up. Determined to save Mark, the commander attaches her suit to a cable and goes into space to save him. But once again, it doesn't work because the cable isn't long enough. As a last-ditch effort, Mark cuts a hole in his suit and uses the air pressure to propel himself toward her. She catches him, and they're both reeled back into the ship where they're all reunited. Years later, back on Earth, Mark becomes a safety instructor for astronauts in training. 5 years after Mark got stuck on Earth, the next manned mission to space is initiated, and as the ship launches into space, Mark and his crew members are all seen watching the launch on TV from wherever they are. That's all for today's recap. Hope you enjoyed it. Please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to see more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.